We're going to be going through basically some Q3 updates. I know we're early on in the quarter, but a lot of things happened in Q2, especially over the last 30 days. A lot of content has been put out by the CMMC AB. A lot of incredible content, infographics, documentation, pricing, a bunch of things that Scott's going to kind of unpack for us, as well as some things that have happened in the industry. And obviously, because of our focus, there's going to be some updates that Scott's going to kind of walk through that have impacted the Microsoft government cloud offerings, namely Microsoft 365, GCC High, as well as Azure Government. I'm going to introduce Scott. If you haven't watched some of our previous videos before, Scott is a president and managing partner here at Summit 7, and he served at NASA as the chief engineer for the NASA Data Center for quite some time. And Scott is a graduate of West Point and has a Master of Information Security from James Madison. So without further ado, I'm going to let Scott unpack the agenda for us, and we'll jump right in.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Sean. I appreciate it. So like Sean said, he alluded to, we're going to cover a fair number of topics today, mostly focused on the front half of the presentation, talking about CMMC and what the AB has put out. And then we're going to jump into some Microsoft US Gov Sovereign Cloud updates. So we're going to cover GCC High. We're going to cover Azure Government. We're going to cover a little bit about Azure Secret as well, because I know a lot of people in this community are very interested in that capability as well and what's coming out with Azure Secret. And then I've got some kind of final industry notes and those kind of things that we'll cover right before we wrap up the meeting here. So the first thing we wanted to cover today, with all of the changes that have been coming out, have been being pushed out by the CMMC AB, there's just some new vocabulary that we really need to deal with, and so instead of just jumping in and trying to explain, what's going on, I wanted to hit some of these vocabulary terms so that we all kind of had a good baseline of knowledge to begin with. So
wait, Scott, you're meaning a new DoD organization created more acronyms?
Yeah. So there's more acronyms. Absolutely, you can't have anything out of the DoD or out of the federal government, I don't think, without more acronyms. So we're gonna cover some of those.
I know everyone's shocked.
So the first one that I think everybody is going to start seeing is this acronym called OSC, or Organization Seeking Certification. And so that is basically, the DIB members. Yep. So anytime you hear someone on the CMMC AB talk about OSCs, they're talking about essentially DIB members that are trying to get certified to the CMMC level. Then when we start talking about assessments themselves, there's three different ones that you may run across. First, certified professional. Second, certified assessor, and finally, the certified third-party assessment organization. And so this is kind of how they fit together. The certified professional is really the first level of training. It's basically the very first thing that you can do to sign up and get trained on how to begin assessments. And then you have an actual certified assessor, which is once you get certified to deliver the level 1, level 3, or level 5 assessments. And those assessors at the level 1 standpoint have to be a U.S. person, and at the level 3 and 5 standpoint, they have to be an actual U.S. citizen. Okay, so you can't do a level 3 or a level 5 assessment without being an actual U.S. citizen.
Makes sense.
And so certified assessors these are the guys and gals that are going to be out there actually assessing the organizations. And then they are all going to work with either directly as like a W-2 employee or potentially as a subcontractor to what's called a C3PAO, or a Certified Third-Party Assessment Organization. And so these are the companies that are approved by the CMMC AB to be out in the marketplace, essentially selling these certification services, these CMMC certification services. And so they're going to ultimately employ these certified assessors to actually go out and visit these companies, visit all the companies that need to actually get assessed. So those are you're going to see that terminology a lot, C3PAO and CA. And then we have a couple different groups of people that go beyond the actual certification piece that are going to be important in the industry. The first one are the registered practitioners and the registered provider organizations. So very much like you have the CA and the C3PAO that are doing assessments, we're going to have registered practitioners and registered partner provider organizations that are going to be delivering kind of the consulting services outside of the assessment. So these are the kinds of people that are going to be certified by or authorized is, I guess, the right word, authorized by CMMC-AB to go out and do implementations, configurations, migrations of content that have CMMC requirements, right? Basically, what the CMMC-AB will be saying with registered practitioners and RPOs, registered provider organizations, these organizations understand the CMMC. They've had some level of training on the CMMC, and these are the kinds of companies that you would go to get consulting around your infrastructure and those kind of things, getting ready for an assessment. And
they've signed off basically that they follow some sort of code of conduct and set of standards and whatnot.
Yeah, there's a CMMC-AB code of conduct that they have to sign up for, just like the CAs and C3POs have to sign up for as well. And then the last set of organization, or last set, is really around the instructors. And these instructors and the instructors, the training organizations, and the publishers that are building the training, these are the guys that are building out the training for the registered practitioners as well as the CAs. Right? And so the licensed instructors, these are going to be the instructors sitting in the classroom, actually delivering the content. The content is going to be built by these licensed partner publishers, or LPPs. And so these materials will be packaged up and created by these LPPs. The LTPs, or the licensed training providers, will essentially buy that content from the LPPs, and then we'll have their trainers get certified as licensed instructors and then go deliver that training to registered practitioners and certified assessors. And so that's how the trainers will be involved in this whole situation. That's some of the vocabulary that we're going to see as we go through some of these slides, and I wanted to make sure that we were level set on that. Anything you think I missed?
Yeah, no, I mean, it seems to me that there's obviously an individual type certification and an organization level certification for assessors, consulting type companies that are providing supplementary services or advisory services, and then there's the training piece of it. And it kind of follows that model throughout all three of those buckets.
That's exactly right. And so one of the things that I haven't really talked about yet, but it is coming, and we're going to see it on the schedule here in a second, is the provisional assessors. Okay, everything that I've talked about is really about what happens when we get into the regular flow of these CMMC assessments. Prior to that, we're going to have this thing called provisional assessors, which are essentially they're identifying basically 60 nationwide that will go through some special training to be able to do the assessments for the very first, what we used to call Pathfinder.
I was about to ask,
the Pathfinder projects, the Pathfinder RFPs. Those will be the assessors that will be doing the assessment for those Pathfinder RFPs.
Okay.
So they are kind of sitting outside of this, because while they may get that provisional assessment, to do these Pathfinders, they're still going to have to go through that whole process of CAs and C3POs and become all of those as a second round. So
I see.
So this is kind of like a beta program, if you will. The provisional is like a beta program, but all those same people that will go through the provisional will still have to go through the regular program once it's released. Okay?
That's good to know.
So the next slide we talk about the schedule, right? We cut off Q1 and Q2. They're kind of past now. We've talked about that on a couple different webinars. No reason to rehash that now. So now we're looking into Q1 of 2021 at this point. So we've got provisional assessors. Those are getting identified, and we'll start training soon. We've got the assessments for those provisional programs. Those will start in late Q3, beginning of Q4, and then the RFPs will start dropping and those kind of things for the RFPs that are coming out with the CMMC requirement. Now, one of the interesting points that I saw made in a couple different articles over the last couple weeks is that we thought that those RFPs were going to start dropping initially in the September-October timeframe, with RFIs even in July, right? Obviously, with COVID and everything that's happened there, it's kind of pushed things along. But I think even more importantly now is there was a comment by Kitty Arrington that those provisional RFPs will not be dropped now until that DFARS update is complete. Right? So now we've got that DFARS update that we're waiting on, because they don't want to have contracts dropping with CMMC as a requirement until there is a requirement in the DFARS specifically pointing to CMMC.
Yeah.
So we're going to get the DFARS update done in the October-November timeframe, and then RFP is dropping sometime right after that DFARS update is complete.
Gotcha.
We're not really looking for a full, the certified assessor training that we talked about earlier. That's not really going to start happening until November, December, maybe even into January is when we're going to really start to see that. And then, kind of the production go live of this whole project is really looking like, probably December, January, February, March, somewhere in that time frame at this point.
Okay.
So it looks like everything's going to end up getting slipped roughly by a quarter.
Okay.
That's kind of what it looks like right now. Okay. All right. So the next thing I wanted to talk about today is the assessment process. So the CMMC-AB has put out a lot of content in the last few weeks about what it's going to look like to get assessed. What are all the different roles, kind of like that I've been going through today. All of this content that you see here, you can go out and you can dig through the CMMC-AB website and you can find all of this content, right? Mm-hmm. Basically, what I'm trying to do is just boil it down and give it to you really quickly and straight versus you having to go through 15 or 20 different web pages to find it.
Surf around.
Right, instead of having to surf around. So that's kind of what we're doing is we're breaking down some of that CMMC-AB website. So what is it going to look like as an OSC trying to get certified? They have a great graphic, a great infographic out there that kind of breaks this down, shows it kind of in a pathway, infographic format. But these are the basics of it. They say very, very clearly that you need to make sure that you start your process at least 6 months before you think you're going to need that certification. Okay, so if you think you have a contract coming up in, say, March of 2021, then you need to start your process of getting in line to get assessed, seriously be in line and being ready to be assessed 6 months before that, which would be October, right? So if you're looking at contracts potentially being released in the March timeframe, end of first quarter, beginning of second quarter of next year, then you really need to be on top of it. Your infrastructure needs to be done here in the next few months, and you need to be looking toward actual assessment. So obviously you've got to understand the requirements. What are the CMMC requirements? We've got lots of webinars out there about what those are. You can find lots of articles out there about the CMMC requirements. So make sure you understand that. You've got to make sure that you understand the scope of your enterprise or the enclave that you're going to get certified. Okay, that's really important. Is making sure that you understand, what is the accreditation boundary of what you're trying to get, certified for CMMC, right? So the next piece is, as part of that, is you want to understand where your FCI is, your CUI is, where your ITAR data is, any other export control type content, or any other kind of controlled data types. Most of those are going to fall under CUI. Things like no foreign and ITAR, they fall under CUI. But go ahead and make sure that you understand where all of that is. All right. From a maturity level standpoint, you need to understand, are you going to get CUI or export control content on these contracts? So once you identify your contracts are coming up, you need to make sure that you have identified what level you think that contract is going to come out at. Is it going to come out at a level 1 because you only have FCI content, you're not dealing with CUI, or is it going to be a CUI contract because you're already dealing with that CUI? Right. Is it going to come out at a level 3, right? So you've got to make sure that you understand what maturity level that you're going to be pursuing. And then once you get all of that kind of figured out, you want to engage potentially an RP, a certified professional, with getting your environment configured to the CMMC standard. All right. Most of you have probably already made really good headway in that. You've already been working toward NIST 171 for a number of years in many cases. And so most of you already have a good handle on what that looks like, and you just probably have a few things that you're trying to tie up. So you can either engage them to help you get the system built to standard, or you can engage them to come in and do essentially a pre-audit assessment. Okay, so you can have them come in, do essentially a pre-assessment on it, and then identify if there are any potential issues. And then you'll go out and obviously remediate whatever those issues are before you actually go out and get your actual assessment. Okay, so the next piece is to go out and find an actual C3PAO. When you go out and find a C3PAO, there's going to be a marketplace on the CMMCAB website where you're going to go find that C3PAO. You're going to sign up, reach out to them, whatever it is, and identify who you're going to use as a C3PAO. Once you get all of that in and you've done your negotiations with them on, what it's going to take from a time-wise, when are they going to kick off, how much is it going to be, all of those kind of things, you have them execute that assessment. So they're going to go in, they're going to execute the assessment, they're going to do all of their, come on site, they're going to meet with you, they're going to look through your maturity level processes, your security processes, your corporate policies and processes, they're going to look at your IT infrastructure, check it against all of the 130 controls if you're doing for a level 3. They're going to check all of that out, and then they're going to give you a report. In that report, there may be holes. Okay, you maybe missed something, and this is one of the things that's been a question for a long time that the CMMCAB has answered now, is that you're going to have up to 90 days to go back and forth with that C3PAO to actually fix any potential issues that may have been identified during the process of that assessment. So that's really, really good news because there was a large segment of the population out there that was very concerned that it was going to be literally a pass-fail day, on-site, go, no-go, and if it was a no-go, you have to get back in line and do it all over again.
Right.
So they've said that you're going to have up to 90 days to resolve any findings with the C3PAO, which I think is really generous, very nice of them to put that process in place. But you're going to have that. Now, once that 90 days is complete, now you're going to have the C3PAO is going to submit that to the CMMCAB, and the CMMCAB quality auditors are now going to assess the assessment. They're going to look through that assessment, make sure that what the C3PAO did met all the necessary standards, that they evaluated everything correctly, and then they're going to review that assessment. And if they say that yes, the assessment was done correctly, there were no issues, then that's when they will issue a 3-year certification for that specific assessment level, be it 1, 3, or 5, whatever it is. So that's kind of the journey of walking through what an OSC is going to get. Obviously, there's a lot of other more detailed processes and things that are going to happen in here, but this is kind of the high level, top 10 points that you have to really pay attention to that you're going to walk through as you go through this process.
That's
okay?
good.
So, one of the first questions that almost everybody's going to have is, okay, so that's the journey. What is it going to cost? What is it going to cost me to go through, say, a level 3 audit, by a C3PAO? And so when I was trying to do this, I reached out to some friends and some colleagues that I work with, like Chandler at Centaur. I reached out to him. And I kind of walked through my thinking on this, and putting together the numbers, and where are we going to be from a cost standpoint for just for one of these assessments, and just a caveat, none of the costs that I'm talking about here have anything to do with getting your infrastructure ready, have nothing to do with building out policy or process or having internal people in your organization to do any of this stuff. None of the prep work. This is literally what are the costs going to be just to get your assessment complete, right? And so when you try to figure that out, you have to look at, okay, well, what is it costing for these assessors to get certified by the CMMCAB to deliver these assessments, right? And so you have to add those up. And so, for an assessor to go through the process of getting certified, for a single assessor, you're looking at, around $14,000, in year one for their cost just to get certified to be able to deliver. And then you have on top of that cost for the C3PAO to register with the CMMCAB and all of that. So, you're looking at, 17 to 20K in cost just for a single C3PAO with a single assessor to get set up, right, to be able to do these things. And then you add on top of that, for every assessment that's done, the CMMCAB gets a fee off of that. And that fee is basically $750 per assessment that the C3PAO has to pay the CMMCAB just for the right to be able to do the assessment. And so so that has to be factored in there. And then you have the actual labor costs that are involved for, I'm making a little bit of an assumption, a little bit of a guess, that a small company level 3 assessment is probably going to take somewhere around 5 days. Okay, so I'm guessing 40 hours of work roughly for a
Conservative.
single person, relatively conservative. And we're talking about a small company here. We're not talking about, a large prime that's got, huge networks and all this. I'm talking about a small, medium business, 100 people, 20 people, something like that, right? They're looking at probably a week to do that kind of level 3 assessment. So, you're probably looking at somewhere between 8 and 12K just in labor cost for that CA to go out and do that work. Then you got travel costs involved in that too. So when you add all that together, what I'm coming up with is about a minimum cost of probably $20,000 for a level 3 assessment to be executed. Okay, that number could go up. Right, that number could certainly go up. It could be $30,000 or $40,000 for a level 3 assessment, even for a small medium business potentially. And then when you start talking about getting into primes and very complex assessments, instead of having one assessor, you may have 2, 3, 5, 10, depending on the size of the assessment.
Right.
You can imagine someone going out and assessing a company like a Northrop Grumman or an IBM or somebody like that. These are big companies with very large, very complex environments. It's going to take a team of people to do these. You're not talking about a single assessor going out and doing this, right?
Yeah.
So it's going to be orders of magnitude potential cost for really large companies. So that just kind of gives you a little bit of an idea of what to expect. Maybe it's just a budget line item in there in your planning for 2021 on what kind of numbers am I thinking that I need to set aside just to get this assessment done.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you're going to have 5 people show up for your ISO audit, let's say, I wouldn't expect that you would only need one auditor just for your CMMC assessment. It may not be exactly apples to apples in terms of 5 to 5, but it's not going to be one.
That's right. So, some other notes as we kind of wrap up the CMMC piece of this talk. Third-party providers like MSPs and MSSPs. This has been talked about a number of times now. It is expected that those third-party providers that are supporting you as an organization are going to have to meet the DFARS and CMMC requirements. Okay, so they have access to CUI. They have CUI probably in their systems, their remote monitoring and management systems and such, their SIM solutions, if they're managing a SIM solution for you. They're going to have access to CUI content in almost all cases. And so they're going to have to meet the DFARS and the CMMC requirements to the same level that you do. So if you're going to be a CMMC L3 organization, then you're going to need to make sure that you are working with MSP, MSSPs, other third-party providers that are also CMMC level 3 certified, right? That's going to be part of the requirement, right? Companies can be both RPOs and C3PAOs. So you can be both an organization doing consulting, like pre-assessment consulting, and those companies can also be a C3PAO. The important piece is you can't be a consulting company for the same company that you actually do assessments for.
Makes sense.
So I can't go out and, for one of my companies or one of my customers, we could not go out and kind of do their implementation and configuration, help them with policy process, all those kind of things, and then turn around on the backside and do their assessment.
Yeah.
That's an organizational conflict of interest, OCI, and that's not allowed, right? So you got to make sure that you don't do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Your home inspector can't turn around and say, "Hey, you should fix your plumbing," and I can actually fix your plumbing.
Yeah. You can't do that. And so then the provisional program, which I talked about a little bit earlier, everything I talked about primarily was all about the actual rolled out program, the final production program. But there is going to be the provisional program. They are going to do 60 assessors. It's only going to be up to level 3. So that's kind of a hint that it doesn't sound like there's going to be level 4, level 5 contracts come out in those Pathfinder contracts. We originally thought that it was going to be a mixture of 1, 3, and 4 and 5.
Yeah.
But now it looks like the government is kind of telegraphing a little bit that the highest level they're going to have is a level 3 as part of the provisional program. Okay. All right. So that gets us through the CMMC components of the talk. So now I'm going to jump into kind of the Microsoft Sovereign Cloud, government cloud stuff. First up is Office 365. So Office 365 GCC High, I wanted to hit some licensing updates here. Microsoft has made some significant changes to licensing in the last couple months, and I want to bring it up for a couple different reasons. One, there's some potential opportunities for some certain types of companies with some certain types of licensing situations to actually save money. And we're always looking for ways to be able to save money for our customers. And so, there has been some new licensing release that's opened up some new types of personas that may be lower cost than what some companies have deployed thus far. And so as they come up on their yearly renewal cycle, they may be able to change. May be able to change the licensing that you have and actually bring down some of your cost potentially there. And so the ones that really talk to that specifically are the first one that I have listed on the screen is the Microsoft 365 F3. This is the frontline worker license. It's been out for a little while now, but we weren't able to use it because it was missing some key features.
Right.
And the key feature that it was missing, and why we wouldn't use it, for compliance, is it didn't have data loss prevention. Right.
Which was in the E3.
Which was in the E3, so it was there, right? So now you see like 5 or 6 down there. I have data loss prevention as a capability now. So Microsoft released the DLP license, which 2 years ago. Was not even on the roadmap to do that. They released it in commercial about a year ago, and now they've released it in GCCI. So now we have the ability to add data loss prevention to most of the other major licenses, which gives us some additional flexibility, which I'll cover on the next slide. So I'm not going to go into that more right now. I'll talk about that when I get to the next slide. So also there is an O365 and an M365 E3 to E5 step-up license now. So if for example, you were E3s across the board and you decided, man, now they've got this audio conferencing capability and this voice capability, and I really need to get to that E5, but I don't want to have to buy all the E5s. I've got all these E3s. Well, now you can actually do a step up. And so you can add this step up license which turns all your E3s into E5s. So you don't have to wait till your next yearly license change to make that change. So that's really good news. Power Apps per user and the per app plan now. So they rolled out this new licensing structure to commercial, 4 or 5 months ago, 3-4 months ago, and now they've rolled it out to GCC High. So now we have the per user and per app plan for Power Apps, which is great. Power Automate, so they changed it from Flow to Power Automate now. That licensing has been rolled out. And then they have the voice apps and the audio conferencing tenant license. That audio conferencing tenant license is really a $0 license. It just kind of has to be there as part of audio conferencing for your tenant, but I wanted to make sure that I brought it up. So those are kind of the new licenses that are available now in GCC High. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about these personas, because this is a big deal. All right, the ones in black, these are the licensed personas that we've been working with for quite a while, right? We originally started out with kind of the corporate user, that third license down, and the email-only user. Those were kind of our 2 original licenses. And then when the Microsoft 365 got rolled out, we got the E3 first, and then we got the Microsoft 365 E5, which is kind of the Cadillac plan, if you will. It's got everything, right? Everything that Microsoft makes is in that plan, essentially. So these are kind of the 4 plans that we've been working with now for, I would say, the last 4 or 5 months. The first one on top is what we call the full corporate user with Windows 10. That includes your Windows 10 licensing, the E5 licensing, the EMS E5 licensing, and the Windows 10 E5 license. All of those are part of that full corporate user with Windows 10 workstation. Now you step that down, or maybe you don't want the E5, but you want E3, right? You don't need audio conferencing and voice apps, and you don't need necessarily e-discovery, and you're not looking to do MCAS and some of the other EMS E5 capabilities. You can use just the regular M365 E3 and add to that the Advanced Threat Protection Plan 1, ATP Plan 1. That is what we call the corporate user with Windows 10. Okay, so you're going to get everything in that except for voice and audio conferencing, and you're not going to get Microsoft Defender Advanced Threat Protection as part of your Windows 10 license, because that's part of the Windows 10 E5, right?
Gotcha.
So that's kind of what I would say that most of our full users these days are going with that Microsoft 365 E3 with ATP. So that's kind of what I would say is the core license that everybody's doing at this point. If you don't need the Windows 10 license, for example, you've got you've licensed Windows 10 Enterprise through some other method or something like that, then maybe you only need the what we call the corporate user. That's your E3 license, your EMS E3 license, and the ATP Plan 1 license. Okay, so before the Windows 10 rolled out, this was kind of our core, right? But that's changed over time as we've stepped it up with Windows 10 and more capabilities that Microsoft's rolled into the whole platform. And then the fourth one is our email-only user. Very popular for companies that have on-site government contractors, people that sit out on government site, that don't really have any engagement with the company except for getting a company email. And they have a mobile device and an email address, and that's basically it, right? And so that's the email-only user. Exchange Online Plan 2, EMS E3, and ATP Plan 1 kind of makes up the lower cost, the lowest cost that we had available previously. Well, that's changed now. Because of the DLP release, we now have the ability to add two new types of licensing personas to this that give us additional flexibility and lower cost, which is great. So we have this limited corporate user. In contrasting this with our corporate user, the limited corporate user uses the E1 instead of the E3. Okay, we previously couldn't use the E1 because of the lack of DLP. So now what we do is we take the E1 with DLP and add to it EMS E3 and ATP, and we meet all the baseline requirements.
That's great.
Right? So these are great for users that don't necessarily need like the full Office Pro Plus. Mm-hmm. So they may not have a corporate laptop. Maybe these are government, or maybe these are contractors sitting out on government site, but they need access to SharePoint and OneDrive and Teams and those capabilities, mm-hmm. but they don't have a company laptop, so they don't need Windows 10. And they don't need desktop apps because they don't have a corporate laptop. They're accessing everything over a web browser, right?
Right.
And so that limited corporate user can give them the kind of web browser access, but to all the services, not just email. Right. So that's really good.
Especially if you have like a technical resource that mainly is supporting the U.S. government, but occasionally you pull them to work on a proposal.
Right.
Or,
Yeah, and so that is a lower cost version. They don't get some of the nicer to have things like the Office Pro Plus and some of that, but they still have access to everything. And so then if we get down to that government site contractor, what I call there the last one, this license is based on the Microsoft 365 F3 license, okay? This is what Microsoft calls a frontline worker license, okay? And the great thing about the Microsoft 365 F3 license is it includes the Intune functionality mm-hmm. built into that. So we have the ability to control the devices they're using. If they've got a mobile device, we have access to SharePoint and OneDrive. We have access to email. We have access to Teams, which is great. Everybody wants access to Teams these days, right? So you have access to all those capabilities and features. You add to it ATP Plan 1 and DLP, and now you have a basic user that can access all the Office 365 services. It's going to be all web-based browser.
In a browser, yeah.
In a browser. It's going to be in a browser. But the challenge or the limitation is really about how much data they're going to have access to, mm-hmm. right? So whereas with the E3 license, they essentially have unlimited email because they've got unlimited archiving, right? And they've got a 100 gig main mailbox. With the F3 license, you get a 2 gig mailbox, okay? You only get a 2 gig OneDrive instead of a terabyte OneDrive. Okay, so there's some of those kind of limitations, but if you're not using that as your primary, your primary email account, you're not using it as your primary, OneDrive location, all of that, that probably isn't going to matter too much because you're on government site. You're probably using their system for most of that stuff anyway.
And especially like at renewal, I would have to imagine after a year, you can easily go back and look and see how many of my users are really using this much data and storing this much data in their OneDrive, etc.
Absolutely. And so, it's a really great option. And from a cost standpoint, it's that government site contractor with the F3 is actually less expensive than the old email only user license was.
Wow.
Okay, so it's a really, really great deal because I've worked with so many companies that have really struggled with, how do I deal with these government site contractors? I can't, I don't want to spend, $500-600 a year for these guys. Well, now we can get it down, less than half of that in almost all cases for that specific capability.
That's awesome.
So it's really, really great. Okay, so those are some updates from a licensing standpoint that I think really will help everybody. Some new capabilities have been released. So phone system and audio conferencing. So this actually was released originally back in the November timeframe, mm-hmm. But it took some time to really, figure it out and make sure that we had all the right licensing capabilities and we had the configuration stuff and all of that. But phone system and audio conferencing, we're now deploying out for customers, for users. There are some great options out there. There's everything from direct routing configurations using session border controllers sitting in Azure, to potentially even using some third parties for some lower cost options as well. So we have a number of different options out there for phone system and audio conferencing. Microsoft has rolled out enhanced reporting now for Teams and OneDrive and Exchange and SharePoint in Office 365 GCCI. So that is something that all of our admins have been asking for a long time. Is we need more reporting capabilities. Well, it's rolling out now, so they've got more of this capability. File size upload limit is now at 100 gigs, so you can actually upload a 100 gig file into
video,
into SharePoint and OneDrive and those kind of things. So that's a crazy high size number for a single file.
Yeah.
We now have the ability to integrate Visio and OneNote directly into Teams. That's a relatively new capability. We got Teams private channels are now rolling out. All right, they're not completely there yet, but they're getting there. They're rolling out right now. Teams real-time presence is out now. And then finally, we've got the ability to trigger Power Automate from inside SharePoint lists and libraries. So these are some of the new capabilities that have just been released over the last couple months. So I think that everybody can find something in that list to like. Some of the things that are coming soon. We've got, and we've been talking about this for a while, which is the B2B external sharing, cross-government sovereign cloud sharing with the migration of Fairfax to Arlington. That's happening, in the next couple months. When some of you may not know what I mean by Fairfax to Arlington. There are two different infrastructures within GCC High. One's called Fairfax, one's called Arlington. Basically, everything that has a onmicrosoft.com extension is a Fairfax tenant, and if you have an onmicrosoft.us name for your tenant, then it's an Arlington tenant. They're picking up all of the .com Fairfax tenants, migrating them into Arlington, and that's going to make B2B and external sharing and some other things available within GCC High, and then eventually cross sovereign cloud.
Okay.
So that's coming, shortly. AIP scanner. So now we have the ability with the EMS-E5 license to actually scan and label with AIP labels content sitting in on-premises file shares and such. So that's a new capability that's coming soon. Unified labeling. This is a really big one. This is the one that really is going to finally tie together DLP and AIP and all the labeling capabilities and all of the sensitive information types and all of that, tying it together into a single system where it is really, really functional. And now we can use things like MCAS to identify documents and stop information flow of CUI and those kind of things. So we really have been waiting on this one for a long time, and we're about to get it. So I'm really excited about that.
Because you can do some of those things present day, but it's through a product that sits in Office 365 or a product that sits in Azure, and now it's going to be basically an integrated product across all environments.
That's right. It's going to be integrated, and it's not going to be, currently right now we have DLP labels and we have AIP labels, and now we're going to take those and we're going to combine them together plus some other magic stuff in the background, and it's going to make it in a very unified labeling and protection mechanism, which is going to be great. ATP has added a couple capabilities like external email forwarding controls, where you can control, how mail can be forwarded out of your organization. Because one of the things that attackers try to do is if they try to get in and compromise your environment, one of the first things they're going to do is they're going to try and set up a forwarder to somebody's email to send to content outside the organization. Like
Absolutely.
Send it to a Gmail address or something like that. So now any email that comes into your O365 environment is going to automatically be forwarded to this Gmail address, and they're going to be able to read everything without ever having to come back in your tenant at all, right? And so you're going to have additional external email forwarding controls to be able to control that really easily. Quarantine notification customization, so that now you as an administrator of staff can go in and customize the quarantine notifications that are going out to your users. So that gives you some additional control there. These next three are all about Teams, and these are things that have been really big with all of the COVID stuff and everybody working from home. There's always been an outcry that Teams can only show a couple streams, right? A couple of video streams. Well, this month, 9 video streams is going to be rolling out to GCC High, and by the end of the quarter, that's going to be 49 video streams. So you'll be able to have a 7x7 tiles on your on Teams to be able to show up to 49 people concurrently in video in Teams.
That's great.
The ability to upgrade to do custom backgrounds and upload custom backgrounds into Teams, something that a lot of people have really liked and had fun
it's just
with.
fun,
On the commercial side, we're going to have that ability to do that in GCC High. One of the things that I was really disappointed to see is we don't have the animated GIFs.
Right.
No animated GIFs, to be able to add in there, but maybe one day we'll get animated GIFs in GCC High.
One day.
That's almost worth it moving back to commercial. No animated GIFs, right? So we don't have that yet, but maybe one day. Priority notifications.
We can dream.
We can dream. That's right. So priority notifications are going to be there. What this is a really interesting capability where an administrator can send out a notification to your Teams client, and it will send it out every 2 minutes until you acknowledge that notification. So if there's something really big happening that you need to know about, they can send out these priority notifications and make sure that you actually have to acknowledge that you've seen it, and that capability is coming into GCC High here very shortly.
Like making folks aware that, hey, there's a phishing email that's circulating, things of that nature.
Things of that nature. It could be used for anything, but yeah, I mean that's a great example.
COVID-19, anything related to corporate wide. Hey, we are now implementing this process. That kind of thing.
Yeah. So it's a really nice notification capability. And then also they rolled out a new advanced e-discovery solution, basically completely replaced the old one, which adds a bunch of enhancements in how you build up cases for, case files for, doing e-discovery and that kind of thing. So new e-discovery solutions rolled out. So that gets us through the Office 365 updates. How are we doing on time?
I think we're doing pretty good. Yeah, everybody continues submitting questions. I think we got probably about another 15, 20 minutes.
Okay. All right. Well, we should have enough time to get through these then. So
Good.
The next two sections I want to go through are around Azure Government. So first, let's jump into that. So Microsoft is doing what they call the CMMC Acceleration Program. Okay. CMMC Acceleration Program is great because, and we're working with Microsoft to help put this together. And what it basically means is we're putting together blueprints and policies and processes around how to configure Azure specifically for CMMC. Mm-hmm. Okay, because right now, we have developed a process and a project around, building out and securing an Azure government tenant to standard. Right. Right now, it's relatively manual. I mean, there's a lot of, and we scripted some stuff, right? But there's still a lot of work that has to be done to make that happen, right?
Right.
And one of the things that we have to do in support of the DIB is make it as easy as possible to move in, lower the cost as where we can. And so what we're doing is Microsoft has started this program, and we're working with Microsoft to do this, is to make it so that we can maybe get that 60, 70%, maybe 80% solution deployed as soon as you deploy a tenant. And you deploy the tenant out, you say, give me the CMMC L3 package, and it's going to deploy basically, with the subscription, those configurations, and that's going to mean that you don't have to do it and you don't have to pay us to do it, right? Yeah. And so then we can focus on the individual idiosyncrasies of your specific environment and getting those up to speed and not have to worry about with basic infrastructure, right? So the whole point is make it faster to migrate in, make it faster to configure to standard, and enhance the repeatability of that. And so that's what we're trying to do.
That's great.
So it's a really great program. Richard Wakeman has put out a great blog post about it. You might want to go out there and check it out. But it's a good blog post talking about what Microsoft is doing to support the CMMC program out there. Okay. Azure Sentinel is now generally available. So we are deploying Azure Sentinel with all of our CMMC, L3 customers. So we're deploying Sentinel out there as a SIM solution. It's working great. So it is generally available now. So you have that available as a cloud-based, SaaS-based SIM solution that can help you meet your CMMC requirements. Okay, premium files on SSD and blob storage is all now available in GCC or in Azure Government. So those are new capabilities. Windows Virtual Desktop is now in preview. It's a private preview, but we're very anxiously awaiting the rollout to production, to general availability for Windows Virtual Desktop. We believe that is going to be wildly successful within Azure Government because so many organizations are looking to build virtual desktop infrastructure enclaves within Azure Government to help them, control, CUI, right?
For the 10 folks that mainly work on stuff in
right.
their 300-person organization.
Right,
For the
building out that
team.
enclave.
Yeah.
Build out that enclave. They connect into that VDI infrastructure. They do their work. It's all self-contained, and it kind of protects the rest of the infrastructure. And so we're really looking forward to Windows Virtual Desktop being rolled out in GA, and we're doing a lot of work with that now. Along those same lines, they're releasing a new version of the NV series, the V4. Whereas the first versions of the NV series were really very heavy, lots of cores, lots of graphics processors. NV stands for NVIDIA, or originally stood for NVIDIA, but now it doesn't, because now they got Radeon processors, graphics processors in there. But you can go all the way down to basically an eighth of a GPU, right? In these, so these are really, really focused toward being able to do GPU type functions in a VDI infrastructure, which is really cool. And so those will be coming out, probably is going to be end of Q4, beginning of Q1 before those are rolled out, but we're watching that closely. And then finally, we've got the Microsoft Defender ATP connector is about to roll out in Azure Government. It's not there yet, but we're waiting on it with bated breath, so that we can actually connect the Microsoft Defender ATP from Windows 10 Enterprise E5 into Azure Sentinel to get all those signals from all your desktops. And now once you get that content in Sentinel, you've got a really great corpus of content that you can really slice and dice, and single pane of glass thing where you can see what's going on in your whole infrastructure. It would be really great. In addition to all of that, so what has happened is Microsoft has rolled out 14 new services that have gotten the FedRAMP High certification. All right, so now we have things like IoT security, Kubernetes, Lighthouse is being rolled out, which is going to be great for us as an MSP, where we can use Lighthouse to manage multiple clients. Really, really working to get that rolled out internally for us. For us as an organization. Customer Lockbox in Azure, machine learning, maps, Sentinel, which we just talked about, and then Dynamics. If you have a Dynamics need, all the Dynamics stack that's in GCC High / Azure Government, it's all been FedRAMP High now as well. So that's great news. All right, so the last piece we're going to cover today is just a quick update on Azure Secret. I only have one slide on this. There's not a lot I can really put out since it's Azure Secret. We got to do that kind of in an offline standpoint. But I wanted to bring out a couple things that we can talk about. So Azure Secret has received provisional authorizations for DoD Impact Level 6, ICD 503, and ICD 705. All of those are provisional authorizations to be able to do secret level information in Azure. And when they first announced Azure Secret back in, I think it was March, April, publicly, they announced 2 regions. Well, now they've announced a 3rd region. So now we've got 3 regions of Azure Secret, 3 data centers of Azure Secret that we can rely on, not just 2, which is great. So obviously Microsoft is showing that they're continuing to make that investment in infrastructure, in data centers to support the DIB and to support the government. So it's a big deal, right? So I've got a lot of customers that I get emails from on an almost weekly basis asking, okay, when can we get Azure Secret, right? Well, we're waiting on DCSA to approve the process to get DIB consumption for Azure Secret. So we're on the front end of that. We're watching that very closely. We're in weekly contact with Microsoft Azure Government team on what's the current status of DCSA and all of that. And so we're waiting on that final approval from DCSA. And as soon as they give Microsoft that final approval for Azure Secret for DIB consumption, that's when we're going to be able to start transacting Azure Secret for our customers. And so as soon as that happens, we'll be out there and let you know. And then shortly after that, we're going to start talking about, okay, not just transacting Azure Secret for you, but being able to actually get you connected up from a networking standpoint, with encryptors, with potentially doing managed services and all those other kind of things that are going to kind of come along with that. So, so Azure Secret is going to be a big deal. And then finally, this is one that I've been asked about a few times, and I'm not sure that many people have really talked about it very much. But Office 365 Secret is now on the roadmap. Okay, so now we have not only Azure Secret, but we're now talking about Office 365 Secret. So we'll be able to have, exchange-based SIPRNet email in Office 365 and SharePoint and OneDrive, and just thinking about that just blows your mind when you think about how difficult it is to work in CIPRNet today, and what it could be like if Office 365 was rolled out on CIPRNet. I mean, that's just amazing. It'd just be a game changer.
Absolutely.
So I'm really looking forward to that. Now, don't expect that anytime. That is not a calendar year this year. That may not even be a calendar year 21 thing, but it is on the roadmap. Okay, it's something that we're looking forward to. All right, so last few things. This is really my last slide, where we're going to talk about just some kind of notes and things, industry news, just things that have happened that we want to talk about a little bit. So there's a FAR case out there now for CUI. We've talked about, I've been talking about for years, how they were looking at taking the DFARS rule and rewriting it for the FAR for CUI to do CUI protection across all the federal government. Well, that is actually back on the docket now, and so they're looking at opening up a comment period for this FAR case, from October to December of this year. So that is back in works. So that means that CUI in all of the federal government, potentially even CMMC for all of the federal government could be part of that. We'll have to see what happens, but it's back on the docket. So it's going to get looked at. So I wanted the Small Manufacturer Cybersecurity Enhancement Act. So this is a bill that was put forward, I believe in the Senate to begin with, that allows for DoD to provide funding to the MEPs, and then the MEPs, or the Manufacturing Extension Partnerships, be able to use that money to give to small businesses that need help with getting CMMC certified. So this is a potential funding mechanism to help businesses, get in place the things that they need to get in place to get up to, CMMC level 1 or level 3 or whatever they need to be. Yeah. So I'm watching that really closely. Hopefully that one comes about and we're able to get some additional funding out there into the industry, which is badly needed. Yeah. All right. OUSD is looking for a new CISO. Some of you probably have seen the news. Looks like Kitty Arrington's moving on. I don't know that for sure, but that's her job. So either she's moving to a different position within OUSD, or she's moving outside. Right? I don't know that yet. I haven't talked to her. This is just going off the news reports, right? Mm-hmm. But they have posted a position out there looking for a new CISO. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with that. Probably should reach out to Katie and say, hey, what's going on? But maybe I'll do that. All right. Let's see. Also, the Senate Armed Services Committee. There's been some rumblings about CMMC and some people not happy with it. Obviously, anytime that there's this big of a change in the industry, there's going to be people that are detractors and don't like what's happening. And so they've kind of gone through their senators, and now the Senate Armed Services Committee is going to actually be studying the CMMC effort as a whole. What's going to be the outcome of that? Nobody knows. But anytime the Senate gets involved, especially the Senate Armed Services Committee, because they hold all the purse strings, right? Yeah. So when you start talking about that, all bets are off. Right. But they're just going to review it. We don't know what that means yet, but it's going to go into some kind of review. Yeah. And then finally, last week, this was really interesting news. GSA released their STARS 3 contract with CMMC listed as a requirement. This is a GSA contract. This isn't a DoD contract. Now, DoD uses it some, right? But it's not an only DoD contract. I put the quote there. This is inside the actual contract. I'm not going to read it out, but that is a quote from the actual contract itself. This is a $50 billion procurement mechanism. It was originally, I think it was like $5 billion, then it went to $12 billion, and now with 3, it's up to $50 billion. Grow, yeah. It's continuing to grow. So this is a very popular contract vehicle, and so they're looking at CMMC as a requirement for that. So that just shows how, even with CMMC not being deployed in DoD yet, the federal government is itching to get their hands on it, and GSA is already starting to push it out in some of their contract vehicles, even without it being fully rolled out.